Just letting you know what's going to be happening over this next hour. We are here, of course, to celebrate the launch of Learnership, this book that I've been working on for the past 12 months or more. And for many of you, I know it's in your hands already. We're going to celebrate this book today and the work that's gone into it and the promise it holds for education as well. In doing that, we're going to talk about the book, we're going to talk about some of the people involved in it, the thought prints that weave their way through this book. We've got some very, very special guests here tonight. We're going to talk to Art Costa. He's going to jump on in due course. I haven't seen his face yet, but I'm sure he'll be here. John Hattie is also going to join us. And we're also being joined by three exceptional principals that have been applying these principles of learnership in their schools, and hear some of their stories as well. Towards the end of the session, as I said, we'll give you an opportunity to share your thoughts, your reflections. I know some of you have already received your copy of Learnership, and I'd love to hear a few words from anybody who wants to share. And I think also towards the end of the session, if you've brought your copy of Learnership along with you, we'd love to get a little photo op of everyone holding up their copy. So it'd be great to see people doing that. So have your copy nearby as we get towards the end of this hour. As I said, this book, you could talk about it being 12 months in the making, but really it's been 30 years in the making. And as I stopped to reflect on the different influences that have guided me in my journey, my thought leadership around this work, there are a couple of names that really stand out. Carol Dweck, obviously, there's Carol's book here. Her work around mindset is one of the big ideas that resonates throughout learnership. And that idea of your mindset being your autopilot, the autopilot for learning, and the way that we nudge our culture and our practice to develop a more growth-orientated culture in our schools is something that underpins this whole book. The work of Anders Ericsson, another prominent person that doesn't get enough attention in education, but his work around the development of talents and abilities and that process of deliberate practice is another idea that weaves its way and forms some of these, what I call the thought prints that fill this book. One of the others that has been prominent in my mind all the way through has been this work around being anti-fragile, the work of Nicholas Taleb. We talk so much in schools today about resilience and about protecting kids and providing a safe environment. And the idea underpinning all that work is that, the big bad world is going to come along and we need to protect kids from it or help them recover and bounce back. Nicholas Taleb offers us a way of thinking about a response to disruption rather than one of needing protecting or one of needing to be recovered from, but rather one of embracing that challenge, that adversity, that disruption in the world, and leveraging it to help us grow. And it's that idea that sort of is one of the major messages that comes through learnership, that it's not about protecting and avoiding challenge, but it's about leveraging it, embracing it, and using that that world that we talk about our students growing up into, where change is the only uncertainty is the only certainty, and change is the only constant, that we use that environment to leverage our growth. Those three ideas and one other have really underpinned all my work over the last 20, 30 years. And the thing I love about it is that all these ideas that I work with aren't good ideas. No one dreamt them up. All right? Carol Dweck didn't make up mindset. She observed it in the real world. And she commented on and describes what happens when you believe this and when you believe that. Same thing with Anders Ericsson. Anders Ericsson observed that there were people in the world that had enormous talents and abilities. and ask the question, are you just naturally like that, or have you done something to acquire those talents and abilities? And he documented this process of building talents and abilities. Taleb, in the same way, didn't make up the idea of anti-fragile. He just described it in the real world. And these three ideas, and the one other that I'm going to talk about in a moment, the thing that I love about it is that they're all reflections of the way the world really works. And I hope that in Learnership, I've captured those key elements that aren't simply a good idea, that they're actually a reflection of the way the world works. When we talk about learnership, we're talking, of course, about the skill of learning, becoming a skillful learner, being someone that knows how to change themselves, that grows and develops agency in the world. But there was a fourth idea. And the fourth idea that I want to talk about is one that started me on this journey. And that, of course, are the habits of mind, the work of Art Costa and Benna Kalick. And it was their work that really started me on this journey. And I owe a great debt to Art and Benna for getting me going. And I wanted to take a moment just to share how it started, because very often you see people that, publishing books or standing on, Olympic stadiums and getting gold medals, and they're amazing. But where did they start? Well, I was a middle years curriculum leader at a P12 school in Melbourne. And in hindsight, I was probably promoted a little bit too early. I was a little bit in the deep end, well and truly in my learning zone. And I went away that year that I got promoted, and I started reading. I did all this reading. I read about multiple intelligences. I read about all sorts of different areas. But the one that struck me was Art and Benna's work around habits of mind. And I came back to school and I said to my principal, Joanne Roberts, we've got to do this work. This work's really, really important. Anyway, I started, and in my enthusiasm, I thought there's 16 habits of mind. If I did 8 in the first week of term and 8 in the second week of term, we'd be good to go for the rest of the year. And that didn't work. But I needed some resources. I needed to sort of help my students understand this work. So I reached out to Art Costa's secretary and said, look, I'm trying to create some posters for the habits of mind, but I've only got these tiny, tiny icons that are in the book. Is there any way you could send me the JPEGs of those files? Anyway, I thought it was worth a shot. Next thing I know, Art Costa is responding to me. Art's written me an email and said, I hear you're doing wonderful work in Melbourne. I've gone, oh my God, if only he knew what I was really doing. Anyway, he found a copy of the icons for me, and I started making posters and all the stuff that in hindsight, was just the tip of the iceberg. But the next thing that happened is Art's written to me and said, James, I've been invited to present in Melbourne. Emeritus Professor Art Costa has been invited to fly from America to Australia to present to a few hundred educators in a few different cities. And he said, James, as you're the local expert, you'll have to present with me. And I went, oh my God. In any case, this was the start of the journey. I asked for some icons, and that journey led me to talking about the habits of mind in my school, and then on and on and on. And so there are people like Art, people like Carol Dweck, Anders Ericsson, Nicholas Taleb, and a whole bunch of others whose thought prints run all the way through my book, through all my work. And as I said, the reason that I'm so grateful and I think the work is so powerful is because it reflects something real about the world. When Art Costa and Benna Kalick described the habits of mind, they didn't sit down one day and go, what do we reckon kids should be doing? They said, successful people do that. We should get kids doing it too. And I think that's enormously powerful. It's interesting, when I started to write the book, I had to draw on the habits of mind, because Learnership is my fifth book. My two immediately before it were these two, The Agile Learner and The Learning Landscape. And I sat down to write Learnership and I had all these ideas. And I thought, how do I do this? So I sat down and did what I did with the other books. I started writing. I had a bit of a plan. And I started writing. And what I discovered was that I was writing another book pretty similar to my previous two books. It was about the same standard. It had about the same, flow and character and those sort of ideas. And I had to stop. Like I'd been writing for about a month and I said, no, this is not good enough. My last books were here, but I wanted Learnership to be here. I wanted it to be better. And so I had to realize that I wasn't smart enough to do that. I pushed myself into my learning zone. I said, well, I'm going to write a better book. And I said, well, I don't know how to write a better book. And suddenly my desk needed cleaning and things needed reorganizing. And I just had to answer that email and all those things that push back against you when you try to better yourself, when you try to grow. Exactly the same emotions as our students. But I stopped and I thought about it. Where am I falling short here? And the habits of mind were part of the answer. Turned out that I wasn't good enough at listening with empathy and understanding. My previous books were about something, but this book I needed to be for somebody. This book, I hope when you read it, is very clearly written for school leaders. It's your guide to developing a school culture that is focused on growth and learning. It helps us break out of this performance culture and teaching culture that we have. And so I didn't have the skills to do that. I didn't know how to structure my book and to communicate those ideas well enough. And importantly, I couldn't do it on my own. And so there are a couple of key people that up front today I really need to thank that helped me take this book from the great books, I should say, that these are, to what I really, truly hope is an extraordinary book that this one is. Those people include the publishing firm that I worked with, Publish Central, and Michael Hanrahan there. But in particular, the person that I probably need to thank most is Andrew Griffiths, who I reached out to as my writing coach. And Andrew guided me through a process where he said, right, James, this is as good as you are now. This is where you've told me you want to be. I'm going to help you get there. And I hope that his input into the way I write a book will come through as you read the book. Andrew couldn't be with us today, but he did share a short video that I want to share with you now to just give his little 2 cents worth on today. So this is Andrew Griffiths. And by the way, if you're thinking, oh, the guy that wrote the Treehouse series, wrong Andrew Griffiths, different Andrew Griffiths.
Hello there, my name is Andrew Griffiths, and I'm very, very happy to be here to say a few words at the launch of Learnership. And what a magnificent book this actually is, what a magnificent cover this is. And I can say this with a little bit of tongue-in-cheek because I actually am James's book writing coach. So we worked together over the last probably, 6-8 months. It's been now, and I've had the great pleasure of working with James Anderson to actually develop the concept. I mean, he knows about learnership. I didn't know a great deal about learnership, but I helped him with turning this really beautiful idea that he has and this concept that he has into the book that many of you are holding, many of you have in front of you now. And it was really a great process for me as well, because James initially said very upfront, I want to write a world-class book. That's why I've come to you, Andrew, to help me, to guide me, to point me in the right direction. And there is no doubt, James, that that's exactly what you have written and published as a world-class book. I think anyone who sees the book, flicks through it, knows straight away there's so much work has gone into this. And you're such a professional, James, with how you approach this. I pushed you pretty hard, and you never pushed back. You kind of did it. You kept going to next mile, that next, what do we do to make it better? You kept lifting and lifting and lifting, and the proof is really in the pudding. And I think that this is one of those kind of extraordinary books that will have a long life, and it will actually be extraordinary, thought-provoking, and drive change in learning institutions, schools predominantly, around the world in many instances. I think there. So I just want to say a very giant congratulations to you, James. I love it when I have someone come to me with that desire to create something extraordinary. That's exactly what you've done, and I hope that you get to celebrate the launch of Learnership, and and just enjoy what a wonderful book it is that you've created. All right, thanks. Have a fabulous time, everyone, and congratulations to you, James. See you, folks.
Thanks, Andrew. Andrew really was a driving force, and he did keep pushing. I'm not sure I didn't entirely push back occasionally, but maybe when I wasn't on the call with him. The other person that probably should be mentioned just about the book too, this cover. Julia, who helped me, who put the cover together, Julia Curtis. Sorry, I forgot there a second. When she initially put the cover designs together for me, she gave me like 8 different ones, all very different to sort of set direction. And when I looked at the 8 laid out, the first one I said absolutely no to was this one. And then she said, well, James, I think you should consider this one. And Andrew said, look, I like it too. Like, I think that's the one you should go for. And I made Julia do 3 or 4 others. And then eventually they pushed me back. Did we make a good choice in the end? Just give me a little wave if you like the cover. Yeah, there you go. Not the one I would have chosen, but there you go. That's part of thinking interdependently. I'm going to invite Art Costa up on the stage with me now to have a chat about the habits of mind, the work, the way the habits fit with learnership. And, I really am very, very honoured and privileged to have had a long association with Art, Benna, and there are people on the call now. Pat Malik and Juanita is here as well. A few of the others from the Institute of Habits of Mind. All these people have helped me along this journey and have woven their thought prints into this book. So Art, I'm not quite sure what time it is for you there, but if you want to jump up on stage, I think the wonderful Jane, who is in the background helping us here, there you go, popped out up on stage there. How are you, Art? Hang on, I've got just the thing. I'm hoping this is the reason. There you go.
There we go. Yeah, it's about 9:15 here. I'm in California, and it's wonderful to join you. And I'm very eager to share my enthusiasm for your wonderful book. What impressed me is that I've spent a good deal of my time in my life working with teachers to improve their instructional techniques and skills and classroom strategies. And what this book does, however, is to look at it from the learner's perspective. And while we're very knowledgeable about what teachers do to engage, to enhance kids, to cause them to be eager learners, we've forgotten a little bit about what the kids need to bring to the learning situation. And that's what you have done. And they need to bring, for example, as you have said, a positive mindset, a growth mindset, one that they feel eager to learn. And the others, of course, are in the habits of mind. They need to be able to persist, because learning is not always an easy task. They need to be open to continuous learning. They need to think flexibly and find other ways of learning on a task. They need to be able to ask questions and to listen with understanding and empathy. And so what you have done is to really enhance the field from both the teacher's perspective and the learner's perspective. I wish the learners, I wish kids would pick up this book and read it to find out what they need to do to bring their skills and attitudes and dispositions to the situation of learning as well. So thank you, James. I'm delighted, and I cherish our wonderful collaboration and the journeys that we have taken together. We've known each other for a long, long time, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Art. Thanks for staying up so late as well for it. I was thinking about this before. Do you remember a trip we took to Rockhampton? And we were working with Rockhampton Grammar. And one of the lessons that I saw there, I think you were in the room with me. It's one that has sort of bubbled to the surface for a long time for me. And I think it exemplifies this idea of where the habits of mind fit for the learner. And I was watching in an early learning classroom, so 4 and 5 year olds, 3 and 4 year olds probably on the floor. And the teacher went through the problem they were going to do. And it was all about the problem. It was all about, hey kids, you're going to go out into the yard and try to figure out what things are living and what things aren't living, and explain the activity. And then she brought the habits of mind into the picture. She said, now, she had one little whiteboard here with all the habits, and she said, which of the habits of mind are going to help you do that? And it wasn't about the habits, it was about the problem. And the habits were the behaviors to help them solve those problems. And that, as far as the kids were concerned, if they went home that day and mum and dad said, what did you learn about today? They would have said living and non-living things. If mum and dad had asked about how did you learn about them, they might have talked about the habits of mind then. But that idea that the habits of mind are a key that unlocks those problems, and that the problem is at the center, is something that has really come to the fore for me.
Yes. The problem and what our habits of mind is about is that it's what you learn to do when you don't know what to do. And so when kids are in that learning zone, that they're stuck, that they have a problem in their head they can't solve, we turn to the habits of mind because it gets them to think more creatively, to ask questions, to think more flexibly, and so on, to turn to other people to help. And so you have built upon that for many years, and we're helping people. How can I say it? This world is going through a crazy stage, and we don't know what to do. We very much don't know what to do in our current stage with all of the violence and heartbreak that's going on around the world. So what do we need to do? We think with more empathy, think with more awesomeness. We think we have to persist with these problems. And that's what we're training and educating our kids to do. So thank you. You're making the world a more thoughtful place, which is what we're all about.
Thanks, Art. And I think that's the point I made at the beginning of the book, that the world is changing more rapidly than ever before. And as you said, when these habits of mind are most useful when we go into our learning zone. And maybe there was a time when you could just choose to go into your learning zone, but that's not today. Today, the world changes so rapidly and it's so much more complex that we find ourselves in our learning zone. And so we've got to be cultivating those habits of mind to prepare us, to future-proof ourselves for those challenges of the future.
Exactly.
Look, Art, I could sit here and talk all day, and I'm sure there are people in the room that would love to just hear us banter all day, but we have only got an hour, so, and I know it's late for you. So thank you very, very much for your input into the book, both in terms of looking at it, but the thought prints that run through it, and for the enormous contribution you've made to me personally and my career as a whole as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and congratulations.
Thanks, Art. On to the next part of today. Jane, if you'd spotlight me again, put me up here. Our next special guest, Art has been with me for a long time, right from the very beginning. Oh, and I forgot to mention somebody else that's been with me from the very beginning. Before we get off the habits of mind, one other person that's worth mentioning here, I said, I reached out to Art, one of the icons for the posters, and was starting my work with habits of mind. There was somebody in that room that I tried to teach the 8 in the first week and 8 in the second week and put the posters on the wall and did all that stuff. Back then she was Maxine Camisoli. Today she's Maxine Wright. And she was in that room when I was teaching. She was one of my students probably 13, 14 years old at the time. And it has been a joy to see her. We only reconnected recently, but now teaching and a leading teacher in her school, and telling stories of how the habits of mind have served her all the way through her life as she's encountered challenges and moved on in her career. So Maxine, I can't see your face in my screen, but I know you're here, and it's a real pleasure to have you here. Our next guest, though, hasn't been with me for 30 years. He's somebody that I reached out to be perfectly honest, a little bit tentatively, just maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And I said, hey, I'm doing this work. I call it Learnership. Here's the sort of picture of what Learnership's about. If you're interested in it, if it looks interesting, I'd love to have a chat. That person, of course, is Professor John Hattie. John responded with it, yeah, looks impressive. Let's have a chat. And we got talking. And I'd like to invite John on stage now to have a little chat about the work. And let's see how this goes, because I'm a little bit anxious about it, but we'll see how we go. So Jane, if you could bring John over. John, I assume, has arrived?
No.
Oh, he hasn't made it.
I'm a bit anxious as well. I've reached out to him. I'm not sure what's wrong, but maybe if we could shift our order, James.
Sure, no problems at all. I did speak to John just a little bit earlier, and I know he was looking forward to being here today. So I'm assuming, in fact, I'll just check, if you don't mind, see if there's a message on my phone. Nope. I'm sure he'll find his way in shortly. Let's shift things along then to, let's face it, the real stars of the show. And those are the people that are working with these ideas, that have been on this journey with me for 3, 4, 5 years, and embedding it into their schools. Because what's important with Learnership is that it's not, a nice idea that people can talk about and, interesting to know about. What matters is that it makes a difference to students in schools. And not just to the students in a sort of, teach them about it way. It actually changes who they are. And that can only happen when strong leaders are doing great work to change the culture of their schools. When you read Learnership, if you haven't had the chance yet, I talk about how the system as a whole, and whether that's the Australian system, the New Zealand system, or any number of education systems around the world, we have this culture of performance, assessment, and teaching. And when you look at the questions that drive what goes on in your school, it's all about demonstrating learning and how teachers make learning happen. I was talking to a group of principals just the other day and said, what would your teachers do if you asked them to design a unit of work? What would be the first thing they did? And one principal just captured it in a sentence. He said, my teachers would ask themselves, how do I make learning happen? How do I make learning happen? I can't make learning happen. Like the quote I use all the way through the book from John Holt, that learning is not the product of teaching. Learning is the product of the activity of learners. And as a teacher, I can create the environment, I can encourage the activity. But at the end of the day, it's what the student does that makes all the difference. And as these schools leaders know, it's getting the students to behave in a way that allows them to get the maximum growth. Learnership is about getting better at getting better. And these leaders are people who are committed to that sort of idea. So I've got 3 principals here that I would love to share their stories with. Starting with Jan. Jan is the principal at Pinjarra. Jan, you'll correct me if I get it wrong. Is it State High School? Senior High School? Senior High School, isn't it? Here we go. Hey, Jan. Jan's got a iPad there. Here we go.
I have.
Yeah, so I always just write Pinjarra, and I always forget about the SHS. Is it senior or secondary high school? It's senior high school, yeah?
Senior high school.
Yeah. Jan, tell us a little bit about the need you saw for learnership in the school. Like, what drew you to this work?
Okay, so I'm going to start with a little bit of a backstory. And that really is around several years ago now. I was at a WASIA conference in Perth, and James was this shiny-faced new speaker who came along, and I thought, oh, I'll pop into the workshop and see what it's all about. And it was actually something that stuck with me from that moment forward. Was the discussion that James presented was the fact that there is no such thing as talent. And I walked out of there feeling quite buoyed by the thought that there might be hope for me yet, if that was the case. And I wasn't a principal at that stage, and that notion really resonated with me as a parent and as an educator. And so it wasn't until several years later that I really had the opportunity to re-engage with James and the work that he does. And that's because I took up the principalship here at Pinjarra Senior High School. And in the first year, I sort of just, like a good poker player, watched the game and the players and saw how things worked. And in the second year, really set about an improvement journey. And at the heart of that was our involvement in an innovation and enterprise project that challenged us to think about schooling and the experience of schooling that our children have in our system. So I guess in that journey around looking at what's going on and what do we do to improve it, it brought me back to the work that James does. And certainly our relationship, moving forward was born out of some thinking attached to that. Part of that work was to address a compelling case for change, to think about what we do with what's going on. And what was going on, by my observation here, not just in the school but across our system, is that there's increasing student disengagement. We had poor retention of our kids through to the end of year 12. But the resounding factor that was specific to Pinjarra for me was just this entrenched sense of no aspiration among not just our students but also their parents. We had a great team working hard. The achievement data was okay. The school was ticking along quite nicely, but it was just not lighting up our young people in the way that it should. And it really kind of, I guess, made me sad that even among our most capable students, there was a distinct sense of them being uninspired about learning, uninspired about future opportunity, and passively viewing their education as something that kind of happens to them, that they just go along with it until it's over. The alternate to that was, of course, kids opting out or, in fact, arcing up and finding themselves, labelled as challenging or disengaged. Now, on reflection, as we got into the work, it really occurred to me that there was some serious thinking to do about fixed mindsets in that space, because that was fundamentally what was wrong with my school and community, was that they were really locked into a very fixed sense of self and what they could hope for out of their education and, in fact, their lives. So that led to us questioning ourselves and asking some really hard questions about the purpose and relevance of education. And then it also led us to even more tricky and challenging questions about being honest about our students and how they experience the schooling that we provide for them. It hasn't changed much in 100 years. Our school had our centenary in 2021, and I don't think in that 100 years a lot had changed about the way that kids come and go from this place. So really, questioning ourselves wasn't enough. We then decided we needed to question our kids, because straight from the horse's mouth was going to give us the best evidence we could possibly work from. So we engaged in some ethnographic surveying, and we asked our students, and all types of students, younger, older, kids from really disengaged, disenfranchised backgrounds through to our top academic students, kids from different ethnicities, etc., etc. And there were three consistent threads that came out of that for us. The first one was that being good at school mattered to every single child. Success was important. The second one was that they wanted school to be connected and relevant and meaningful in the world outside our gates. They needed it to be useful. And the final thing was that they wanted a trusted adult in their life, in their school life, that they could go to for help and advice and guidance, but who didn't tell them what to do. Because when they were told what to do, it made them feel stupid. And it really entrenched that sense of being the kid who had to ask the question or not know how to ask the question, or even if there was a question to be asked. So we use that feedback from our students as key drivers in building our case for change, and in fact reimagining our school to be far more capable and competent in delivering the kind of educational experience that our kids need to be good as 21st century learners. So we set about the work, and there were three things we absolutely had to do. The first one was to shift our thinking from being reactive to proactive. The second one was that we needed to shift our focus from being obsessed with how we teach to how kids learn, and being open to the fact that we're not always right in the way that we go about setting up our classrooms. And I think the last one, and attached to that is that notion we had to create some skin in the game for our students. They had to become centralised stakeholders and accountable for their own learning in some way. And the last one was innovating our pedagogy to actually give them some real world skills that they would have lifelong. So we drew on the enterprise skill set of problem solving, creativity, communication, collaboration, partnership, teamwork, intercultural learning, those sorts of things as underpinning principles of our instructional models. Now, it sounds like we've made great progress in that space. All we did was think about, so what do we do? These were the things we realised that we needed to do. The second part of the thinking attached to that was, geez, we're really going to have to change our mindset. It's not just the kids who are fixed, it's us too. So we set up in our school professional learning communities that were entirely based on action research. The whole point of it wasn't what they action researched. It was the fact they got into the learning zone often and that they had to stick with it even when it was hard, in a pretty risk-free environment for our teachers, because they were test driving ideas in their classrooms in spaces that were familiar and safe for them. I guess the book and the work that's come out of Learnership is really exciting from our perspective, because while we've touched in bits of it, and I feel like I'm sort of suggesting that we've made it through the storm and that we're absolutely embedding and normalising, we're absolutely not. I don't think there'll ever be a point at which we're done and I'm satisfied. But it's given us we had a blueprint, and this has given us the roadmap. It's really given us an opportunity to be instructed about how to do the work, not just what to do, but how to do it. And over the 4 years, we have shifted our perspectives. We've impacted our practice quite a lot. We've learned about the mindset continuum. We've learned about the learnership matrix, but now we also have got some idea of how to nudge our students and ourselves towards being the educational experience that we want. It's about growth. We've got a long way to go. As I said, we've had 4 or so years with James. Now I think, James, it's about that long that we've been plaguing you.
And you're doing great work.
Questions. Yeah.
But you're doing great work.
We're working on it, but it's very much a work in progress. And I think that the book will help us to do the work we need to do, and going back and picking up the folks who haven't been on the journey from the beginning, but also stretching those of us who have into the next levels of where we need to go and what we need to do to keep on embedding and normalising the idea that learning is about learners. And teaching is about the facilitation of environments and contexts and scripts and conversations and relationships that can make it work. So the book is really exciting for us, James. It gives me, rather than having to spend hours talking to people and, trying to ignite the fuse myself, it gives me an opportunity for them to have a direct conduit to you to be able to do that. So thank you for the book. Thank you for being on our journey and informing our journey. And we've still got some work to do, obviously, going forward.
Thanks very much, Jan. And just as perhaps we probably should do this for Jan. There we go. Thanks for the work you're doing. Just as Jane sort of switches things over, and I'll invite Carl up. I'll just hit on a few points that you made. The idea that, one, we're switching the focus from the teaching to the learning. I think that's key in the idea of learnership. And the other one, the way you started, the idea that that low aspirations, these kids that don't see a chance for themselves in the future, that aren't setting goals for themselves, that are saying, well, I can only get as good as my parents, or they don't see a way out. And that's been a driving thread through the book, that we need to develop students who have agency, who feel powerful,
Absolutely.
not powerless in the world, that feel like the master of their circumstances, not the victim of their circumstances. And I think the idea that you focused on a few times there, that it's about growth. It's about improvement and seeing the change. So thank you for the work you're doing. I'll hand over to another school principal who you haven't met yet, but you should. Carl Allen. Now, Carl, where are you? Here somewhere? I'm sure you're here.
Yep, just
Carl runs a beautiful. Beg your pardon, Jane?
Just bringing him up now.
Yeah, great. Carl runs a beautiful primary school in Hamilton in New Zealand, and here he is getting his stuff ready. Kia ora to you, Carl.
Yes, kia ora, James, and everyone else. Yeah, I'm Carl Allen from Hamilton. If you're wondering what the noises are in the background, we've got Year 4 camp here at school. So yeah, the screams and fits of laughter are still at 5:30 is going on. But I've asked to try and move the activities over there.
That were your kids cheering for you.
Oh, so I presume I have, you can hear me?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah,
Oh,
you were good.
spot.
I was mucking
Good
around.
So James Anderson, we've been working with you, James, just over a year now. We got James in for a whole staff PLD end of 2021. Where do we meet James?
Why did you do that?
Sorry?
Why did you bring me in for a PL? What was the need that drove it? What did you see going on in your school?
Yeah, I guess the backstory to that is a little bit like Jan mentioned. We've got really well-meaning students. We've got a really hardworking staff. We don't seem to have the same behaviour issues as other schools. But for want of a better term, we're a bit of a blunt instrument. Everything's nice. And unfortunately, one question James has asked me recently is, what is the undefined learning culture at your school? And if I was to answer this a year ago, and it's a little bit embarrassing, it's almost compliance. Yes, we've got really hardworking teachers, and our data's fine, but we're not here just for fine. As we know, we need to prepare students for the future. Our role is in a primary school is foundational. We want to make sure that we've set our students up to go to that next step when they hit intermediate and they hit high school, so they can go on and do what they need to do. So we needed a shake-up. And James has provided that with his Learnership framework. It's really interesting the impact that James has had on our staff personally and professionally, which is a really interesting thing to note.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I guess a little backstory for us. James, I took over as principal at Glenview Primary School in 2020, right in COVID, so that was really good fun. But previous to that, we had James, the previous principal, Tony, a lot of time for Tony, fantastic bloke. But he got this fantastic guy in James, but he only gave him to 2 staff members in each area. Don't ask me why. So we had little pockets of this really excited, informed staff, but it didn't go right across our staff, which I thought was just a terrible model. So went away, did some research around Learnership, and we just had lights going on everywhere. So we couldn't get in quick enough, made contact with James. But what I wanted to do is, if we're going to do something, it's got to be a whole staff approach. James isn't cheap, is he, guys? I think we'll all agree on that. But we do get, but yeah, I was going to say, but we do get bang for buck. So we went down, what we were looking for was a framework and like we mentioned before, and a partnership in the learning process, which we didn't previously have. What we had here was lots of students sitting up straight, and the students that had all the answers put their hands up, and quite often other students weren't challenged. But they didn't make a lot of noise and they didn't cause trouble. So for our teaching staff, that was okay. For us as leaders, we know that's not okay. We need to challenge everybody. And we're looking at growth. Previously, we were firmly focused on data takes and achievement. Now we're actually focused on growth, which is it's a real game changer. As I mentioned before, for a lot of our staff, they sat with James for 2 days and he sat there and challenged their expectations. And one key statement that came out of that was his work around there's no such thing as talent. And that just caused a massive rumble within the room. Oh, James, but what about the person that can play guitar? James, what about the guy that can run really fast? So James came back and said, hey, take the physicalities out of it, the genetics around your size and strength, but everything else, no such thing as talent. What that did straight away for our teachers is challenge their conceptions, or their perceptions, I should say, around Johnny, Jackie, every other student in their class. So he wiped that out straight away. The other thing that he did was introduce the learning zones. And for us, this was powerful, because what a lot of my staff members, when they were eating lunch, the big buzz in the staff room on that PLD day was, oh my God, I've been living in my comfort zone. Since then, James, we've got teachers doing all sorts of things in their personal life. They can see the value in it. We've got people that have dropped 20 kgs, all based on those 2 days. I know these are just fringe benefits that have sort of come, but they can kind of see the power in what living in the comfort zone does for you. And so for our students, where are we at now? We're a year deep. And I can confidently say that we're now, like Jan, we're not there. And we've got a long way to go. But we are now firmly focused on learning and creating learners. I guess the difference now is we feel like the curriculum now is just the vehicle that we're using to teach students to be better learners. And James and the work that you've done with the Learnership has given us a framework and a blueprint. All power to Carol Dweck and positive mindsets, no criticisms. But what you've done, James, is you've provided a real framework and something that we can work with and follow, especially around the agile learner and the types of behaviors that go with it. And then with the mindsets, even better. So for us, one little example is my own daughter who does go to this school, and she's always been a really capable student, but everything had to be pretty and it had to be 100%. Now, this year, she's come home and we drive to school together, and she said to me, I said, what's the matter, darling? It's going to be yucky this morning. Yucky? Talk me through yucky. Well, it's learning time and I've got to get yucky, because if I don't get yucky, if I don't do the hard stuff, and I don't like being wrong, but if I don't go there, I'm not going to grow. And I thought, for a 10-year-old to have that, whereas if we rolled the clock back 12 months, she was really concerned that the teacher ticked everything and told her she was awesome. Now, if I look at the two experiences from a parent and from an educator's perspective, I want the second one. I want the person that knows, I've got to get yucky and I don't like it. And sometimes it is a bit embarrassing, but that's growth. And so she's now has an awareness of learning. And if anything, at 10 years old, she's now got the blueprint to take her to learn whatever she wants to learn in the future. So beautiful. Have we got that right across our school? Not quite. That'd be fair, right, James? Not quite.
No. But it's always a journey.
Yeah, but if I look at how our teachers now plan and prepare, just a huge difference, because initially there was a really, how do I put this, a mile wide, inch deep sort of understanding that, just sounds like we got to get the kids into the learning zone. I do that anyway. Now that we've come 4 terms deep, they realize that the zones are just a guide and an entranceway into the actual how they should be preparing. What we've found with a lot of our lower learners, and especially our year 1s and 2s who are new to school, they're constantly in the learning zone. And as a result, we know that is hard and that's yucky. So if we're there all day, by the time we get to lunch, we're seeing some behaviors that we don't really want to see. But that's how we're designing our program. So it's had a really big impact on how our teachers actually design their day now. And we're finding that we've finished what we do in New Zealand with a little bit of standardized testing, that our results are some of the best we've seen since I've been here, and I've been here close to 10 years. And we've only just got the tip of the iceberg. But the cool thing about it too is we're not just focused on that. We're not about trying to get that result. That's just the byproduct of us actually focusing on growth. So that's kind of our story, James.
Beautiful. Thanks, Carl. It's so good. And that so much in there, that focus on growth, and the results will look after themselves. Like the impact of the zones, that I'm not even going to try and summarize it all. I'm going to give you a round of applause and say thank you very, very much for sharing part of your story. Being part of that beautiful school. Yeah, fantastic. Hey, I've got an eye on the time too, and I want to make sure Elizabeth gets a chance. Jane, did John manage to find his way into the meeting?
Yes, thanks. We had an issue. We've resolved it and he's here.
Oh, beautiful. Hey, look, folks, there's no way in the world we're going to talk to John and to Elizabeth and finish at 4:30. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask John to come up on stage, because I know a lot of you came to hear John talk about the book. We're going to go to just after 3:30. I'm going to ask us to keep John to keep nice and tight, and we'll go to about 4:35, gives about 15 minutes. At that point, for those of you who need to leave, I understand, but then I'll jump across to Elizabeth, and it's worth waiting. If you can stay till 4:45 Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Summer Time, I should say, and to hear Elizabeth's story at the end. Elizabeth, are you okay with waiting just a little while to finish the session on your school, on Asquith Girls?
I'll do anything for you, James.
Oh, that's good of you. Thanks, Elizabeth. All right, so we'll do that. John and I will have a chat for about 15 minutes. So John, we'll keep it nice and tight and punchy. and then we'll go to Elizabeth, then we'll wrap up for today. So, as I was saying, John, we've only had a personal connection for a couple of months. Really, I sort of throw you an early copy of the book, and I had my fingers crossed. I thought, oh, what's he going to say? And what did you think of it when I threw you that draft?
Well, it's also good following Carl, because as we know, all quality comes from New Zealand. But ignoring that for a moment, Victoria's not so bad either. And my first reaction is that, wow, we have a million books on how to teach and hardly anything about the concept of learning. And we talk about teachers' professional learning, and we forget what the learning part is. And I was listening to Carl then, that whole notion, like the good news is that kids couldn't care less about how we teach. They care about how they learn. And so it's not surprising that we as educators get a bit concerned about the whole teaching part of it. But a book that is actually focused on how you go about teaching the science of reading. So I want to congratulate you first, Carl, on I know it's your fifth book. I also envy your writing skills. I'm very good at writing academic ease, and that's not what teachers want to read. And so you've got that balance. So that appealed to me as well, that it was very readable. It included a lot of the work about the whole notion of science. And I remember a few years ago here in Victoria, we had a bit of a push from the government about high impact teaching strategies. They also released another document at the same time about high impact learning strategies, which disappeared. There was no interest. So we're fighting uphill here. And so I'm going to ask you a question, James, which goes to the heart of why I like the book, is that when I ask teachers, many of you here today, what's your model of teaching? You can't shut them up. They can talk for hours about their model of teaching. But then I ask you, what's your model of learning? How do you go about learning? Even as adults in the business, we struggle. So that limited vocabulary we have about learning, the limited vocabulary that students have, and you mentioned, Carl, a lot of kids sit there and they learn very quickly by about age 8 that their job is to look like they're interested and hope they don't get picked on. And I remember my own son, he was 11 when he had the conversation with me, that sort of one of those awkward moments. He was one of those kids, sat there, teachers liked him. We knew he went to school for lunch, sport, and girls. And he said to me, Dad, I haven't a clue what they're doing at school. I'm a fraud. There's a lot of kids like that, too many kids. So, James, how do we get teachers to think about their own learning and how they learn? How do we get them to have a model of learning? How do we get to see and give the students a language of learning? And I know I'm going to ask you to sum up your whole book in a few sentences here, but that's the beauty of what I saw you trying to do.
Look, and I'll try and give you an answer in a few sentences too. I think one of the key things, and I think Elizabeth and Jan and Carl will agree with me, one of the key things to start that conversation is to give teachers permission. We're in such this, it's all about the teacher. It's all about your teaching strategies. You make learning happen. And teachers are under this enormous pressure and this feeling of it's all up to me to make sure students learn. And when I come in and talk to them and say, it's all right, you are a great teacher. The part of the problem that's going on here is not what you're doing, it's what they're doing. And they go, oh. I said, you've got great teaching skills. You know how to teach, you can do this. What we need to do is to teach them how to learn. And that shift to recognize it's not just up to the teacher, it's up to what the students do as well. And I described that in that learning equation, that it's the growth occurs from the skill of the teacher and the skill of the learner. And when teachers get that, they go, oh, all right, I actually sort of knew that, and thanks for saying it. And that gives them permission to start saying, well, all right, let's talk about learning. Now, I think Jan would be the first to tell us, and I hope you don't mind me quoting you, Jan, that the I do, we do, you do model of teaching and learning is limited by the I do part. And that teachers, many of us, aren't very good learners. We have spent a long time in our comfort zones. And being given that language, like Carl walking out and saying, oh, no such thing as talent. By the way, of course, there's something called talent. It's just not a magical thing that you're born with. It's something you develop and grow through that process of deliberate practice, etc. So I know what you meant by that. But that idea of helping them understand the learning process, giving them the language, the habits of mind, giving them the language of the zones, changing the meaning of mistakes. Did I say 2 sentences I was going to answer in?
You're writing another book.
Yeah. All that. But I think that's where it starts. It starts with just that recognition of, hey, it's not just you. And I come back to that John Holt quote that really kicked me off, that learning's not the product of teaching. Learning is the product of the activity of learners. And this now is a time with learnership to focus on the activity of learners.
You have your byline to the book, from an act to an art. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, look, when we see something done well, we see it as a thing of beauty. We see it as a thing that we recognize has taken time and effort and resources, and there's a beginner and an expert. And at the moment, most people, when they talk about learning, it's kind of one-dimensional, like we learn. And maybe there's some learning strategies that happen along the way, but people learn. And it's not a case, we don't think of learning as something skillful. So the byline of the book about raising the status of learning from a mere act, something that's done, to an art, something you develop, something you extend and build on, something you learn to do well. And I come back, and I know I shouldn't use this metaphor, because sometimes when I talk about the Torvill and Dean example, there are too many people in my audience that don't know who Torvill and Dean are. But nonetheless, Torvill and Dean, if you don't know, figure skaters at the Olympics, I think about 82 it would have been, but ice skaters, and the way they partner each other. We know what skillful teaching looks like. What I've tried to do in Learnership is talk about what skillful learning looks like. And that, when done in partnership, is what leads to growth. So the byline about raising the status of learning from an act to an art, I imagine a time when teachers, leaders, principals, walk past a classroom with the knowledge of what skillful learning looks like, and can look in that window and go, what that kid's doing? That's beautiful. That's what I want to see happen.
One more, James. When I look at the research on a really good study recently, where what happens in a classroom when a teacher asks a question, student puts their hand up and they give the wrong answer. 50% of the time, the teacher corrects the student. Up to 50% of the time, the teacher asks another student to correct the student. Less than 3% of the time, that error is seen as an opportunity. It's no surprise that kids think school is about getting it right. And if you don't get it right, you aren't in that business. I also know from the meta studies we've done on classroom observation that teachers talk 89% of the time. They ask 150 to 200 questions a day that require less than 3-word answers. And here's the interesting part, the conspiracy. Kids above average want teachers to talk more about the facts, because that's the game they're winner at. One step further, we know why teachers don't ask students and wallow in the error and do what Carl's daughter was saying, where they get dirty and they go down into the pit, etc., because it dents their self-esteem. So all that put together, it's no surprise that classrooms are reasonably compliant, that classrooms are about getting it right. And I would argue that probably half the kids by age 8 have learned that schooling is not for them, it's to be survived. What chance do we have after reading your book?
Oh, every chance in the world. Now move on to the next question.
And can I just say also, just one last comment there. I also know that Costa's on this. He's been arguing this for probably as long as I've been around, that we've got to bring this whole notion back in to get the students thinking aloud, to hear what they're thinking, to give them the skills of thinking, to know what to do when they don't know what to do. And I think this is, and you've actually summed it up into those nice kind of 5 elements of learnership. And so You ask why I like the book, it's all that.
Thank you. And I think it's worth just, for those of you who haven't had a chance to read the book yet, those 5 elements are there because the challenge is what drives growth. Like we've heard Carl sort of saying, when you just keep doing the same stuff, you don't change. And we want to put that focus on growth and development. There's a whole lot behind that. But if challenge is the pathway, then the habits of mind are the verbs that take you down that path. They're the actions you take. And whether we do them in specific, small strategies like note taking or whatever it might be, they require the disposition to do that. And that's what Art Costa and Bennett Kalick described. The mistakes and the feedback, that's about the information you need to continue down that journey. And the effort part, the time and energy, is about the resources it takes to take that journey. And so if we're talking about building your backstory, I talk a lot about backstories in the book, from being a relatively useless 3-year-old who can't do very much at all, to being someone who's out there being extraordinary in the world, having agency and being the master of their circumstances, then I hope what I've tried to describe is the pathway to the way to journey down that path. So, and it's been a real thrill, John. I'd love to sit down with you and Art and a few other people in this room today and just, open a bottle or 2 of wine and just have a chat, but maybe not today. I think it must be about 10 o'clock for Art by now. So thank you.
Good night, all.
We would be remiss if we didn't invite Elizabeth onto the stage. So a big round of applause. Thank you, John. I don't know what the issue we had, but I'm glad we had it resolved. Thanks for being here today, and hopefully we can continue this conversation down the track as well. Give you a round of applause. Elizabeth, thank you for your patience, for waiting there quietly. Look, we've saved the best to last. You're going to feel pretty good about that.
Always.
But we've given you.
I know you look after me
very
well.
little time.
I know you look after me well. Well, can I greet everybody? And it is an absolute pleasure to be part of the team. And congratulations on your new book. I have to say that I'm on page 5, but I've got a reason. I'm a mathematician, so therefore reading doesn't go really well with me. But I promise you, I will read it because it is research, and research I love. As a mathematician, it is interesting. I actually came across James Sanderson through the Twitter, and I read an incredible article about the learnership and about the growth mindset, and I thought, oops, that sounds really, really good. So therefore, I've sent him an email, and sure enough, he replied. You may ask, why was I attracted to what he was advertising on the Twitter? I have been in the profession approximately 40 years, and I have been from a classroom teacher to a principal now. My background is mathematics. And one thing that always bothered me is that education does not serve the needs of the children. And why do I make this comment? Is because when you talk to the children, very few of them know why they go to school and why they learn. And this really, really worried me. We have what we call professionals in the classroom, that they know they can lay well. However, though, when you ask the children what they take away from every classroom, it was very little, or most of the time it was none. They could not articulate their learning. That always has been an issue for me. Working in a girls' schools, also was very concerned about the lack of confidence when it came to mathematics or sciences, or even in other subjects. Often I will hear, Miss, I'm not good enough. Or, you know what I mean, I've been told that I cannot do this. It was also about the teachers that we do have the experts, but always I use the metaphor, I may be the best chef, and I can give you the best plate of fish. But if you're allergic to it, you will not be able to tell me, you know what I mean, whether they taste well or not. So therefore, those things were in my mind as when I became a principal in 2013. They were the sort of, the struggles that I was having. How do I make my girls become confident learners? And how do I make the classroom become vibrant? Not student driven, as John put it, teacher driven, as John put, that the majority of the time the teachers talk. But I was more interested that they go into the classroom to learn, but they understand what they learn. It is not about the 80, it is not about the 90 or the 50%, but it is about the journey, that it will assist them to basically manage the world that they see in front of them, full of uncertainties and a lot of problem solving. And I could not see that we were acquiring those skills. It was also about my teachers who, they were exceptional practitioners, but I'm not so sure if they ever thought how their students learn. I don't think they ever questioned themselves how they learn as professionals. We touched a little bit on that. So from all this, I was really attracted to what I read about James and what he was doing with the growth mindset, which was very, very familiar, because often I presented to my staff about Carol Dweck. But what I found that learnership, it was interesting when James said, we will, I'll be very happy, Elizabeth, to come on board. The first thing that I did is actually change the mindset of the teachers, that education is not about HSC, education is not about ATA. Education is about educating children and opening multiple doors for them. And therefore, whichever door they open, there is an invitation for them to succeed. So we started with the parents. We did similar professional learning with the students as well, because I felt whatever we did with the teachers, we might do with the students. For me and for my staff, it was extremely important that the children understand the purpose of learning, but also believe in themselves. Therefore, which habit of minds do we use in order to be able to move forward? And also we included the parents as well. So you can see it as a triangle where professional learning for teachers, professional learning for students, but it was also interesting to change that parent perception. I wanted the parent to be on board and for the parents to understand how their children learn, and not in my meetings to label them, but Mrs. Ambrosio, she's not good at maths. That is something that I refuse to accept. I refuse to accept that children, your
parent community was so receptive to that. It was,
that's exactly
really
right.
building that whole community.
Yeah, and sort of that triangle made a huge difference. So what I've done is I've got 4 quotations, if you give me a moment. This is coming directly from my students, because student voice at Asquith is all that it matters. So the children actually, they have voice the way they learn and the way they want to succeed. And that's why I found what James offered. It was absolutely brilliant. And it was something that, we wanted to embrace, and we have embraced it. And I must say that we moved. So therefore, we asked them a question as to what difference did the program make? The school also has an Asquith individualized mentoring. Every child has a mentor, and they set their goals, and their goals are based on habits of mind. Similarly, the assessment task includes the habits of minds as well. So therefore, it is something that has become part of the fabric, and is not something that is done in some classes and not others. It is part of the school. So this particular student, I don't have the names, but they put on my table.
I can't think of a better way to wrap up.
It was not planned.
To talk about the students.
Yeah, it was not planned. It was just, someone said to me, Elizabeth, you might like to see what the kids are saying, right? So he says that the tips that have been helpful for me in my learning process are understanding what the material is in class and using the home to complete those. For example, using the applying past knowledge to new situations has been extremely helpful, as it gives me a better understanding of what the work is. I also persist in all my subjects by using the home and achieving marks that satisfy my expectations. Another one said, when we learn about the habits of mind, I use the strategy of thinking flexibly in tests, which moves me towards my goal. Another one says, persisting through assessments and completing them with good work without procrastinating. Responding with wonderment and awe makes things more interesting when you think about the bigger picture, and makes you more motivated to learn and listen. And the last one says, some tips that have helped me learn are thinking of different ways to accomplish the problem that I have been given. I use the thinking flexibly, habit of minds, you're wonderful. So this is the children saying their story. And I think when you read those stories, you cannot stop yourself smiling and thinking, well, we are on the right path, because it is not about us as teachers. It is about the learners, and they're the ones that would make the difference in the world. So it has been a wonderful journey. We've been since together 2019 is the first time I spoke to you. Yeah. And it was like, school development day of term 4. We had COVID and a lot of other things that we've done, most of our work online. But definitely we can see that appreciation, and we can see also the reports now that the teachers write, the habits of mind are part of that reporting. And we stopped having parent-teacher nights like the 5 minute, the speed dating, as I call it, that actually we've got student-led conferences, 20 minutes, every child says the story of their learning to the parents as well as to the teachers. So the focus has completely changed from a teacher-driven classroom and teachers tell you what to do to this is what I need, so therefore how you're going to assist me and help me in order to achieve it. So that's sort of our story.
Thanks, Elizabeth. That's beautiful. And I would love to stay and chat with you, but I did promise people we'd wrap up at 1:45. Well, I've promised 1:30, so we'll wrap it up. And I think the other thing, you sold yourself short, because don't forget this year you were a, what's the correct way to phrase it? School of Excellence. Is that the right way to phrase it?
So this is for the education.
The
you mean for the Australian
award,
Education Award. Yeah.
For this work
we did that.
Doing.
Yeah.
So that's extraordinary. All right, folks. Look, a big thank you to everyone who's helped celebrate this today, to Art and to John and to Jan and to Carl and Elizabeth as well, to all the very, very many special people that have come along. I know I've got a huge list of people that I know was popping in. Other authors that are here. We've got Ryan Gottfridson's coming from the States somewhere here, Michael Iani, Faye Huey, Miles Campbell, Mike Walsh, all these people, Danielle Flecky, a whole bunch of people that I would have loved to sort of grabbed you and pulled you up on stage, but really thrilled that everyone's here and is getting so much out of this work. I do have 3 final thank yous to Jane for looking after the background and obviously helping John out to get onto the meeting today. Stacey Packer is somewhere here. I can't see you, beautiful. There you are, Stacey. Where Andrew helped me get the book up and running, Stacey's now helping me sort of get everything running after it, and she's been a great help as well. And of course to my beautiful partner Fiona, who has her own book at the moment. So we're both launching books at the moment, and the place is chaos. We have a distribution centre in our lounge room rather than a lounge room these days. But yeah, the way she supported me through this has been beautiful as well. Quickly, while we've got still people here, who has actually got a copy of the book? Let's see if we can get the screenshot of people holding their book up. This is Jane, this is your moment in the sun to get a picture of everyone going like, yay! This is for the social media folks. Oh, Katie, I forgot. Didn't Katie come all the way from South Africa, got herself up at 6 o'clock in the morning? I'm going to have to write a blog about Katie. She is beautiful and does extraordinary work in South Africa, but we do have to wrap it up. I'm so sorry. Have we got that, Jane? Good. Hey, look, I'm going to hang around and chat to anybody who wants to chat. Katie, you want to hang around? I'll chat to you as well. But I do appreciate, I am normally a stickler for finishing on time. I just shoved too much into it, didn't I? It was more than, well, but did you get something out of it? Did you enjoy yourselves today? Fantastic. Claudia's here from Romania. I don't know what time it is in Romania at the moment. It must be some ungodly hour at the time. It's fantastic to see you all here. I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to say thank you all very much. I'm going to do this. I'm going to play a bit of music out. But hang around and I'll have a chat. Thanks, John. Still here. Because I imagine Art maybe had to leave at some point, very late where he was. Hey Mel, I saw you. Good, thanks. Miles, thanks. I'm glad you made it on. I see you there. Miles is running down to the post office this afternoon to grab his copy. Glad we got you in the shot.